Okay, so just as a reminder, I do have my Strathmore 18 by 24 inch drawing paper. And you notice I sort of made a cutout, almost cutout picture plane from using my tape. Again, I have my blue painter's tape here, my set of graphite pencils, and we talked about this later or before class on Monday in terms of how dark some of these gradations are. So the higher the number H is the lightest, so 6H is your lightest, okay? Then I'll go to the highest darkest number, which is 6B, and that will be your darkest. So think about it that way. Meaning if we go to 5B, and then 4B, and then 3B, 2B, and then standard B, that gets lighter and lighter and lighter, okay? And the same thing for my H's. We have a 6H, 4H, 2H, and then HB, which is somewhat in between the B and the H. So that's the sort of value it's sort of arranged at. Let me zoom in a little bit so we can see the difference, okay? And what I like to do at this stage is actually pull my sheet of paper right about here where I have a little bit of negative space. I'm gonna make some values with some of these pencils, okay? And then you can then see visually how dark and then how light some of these are. Zoom in a little bit further, okay? So I'll start from here. Here, in this, you can do this as well while we're in the process of the demo. Okay, this is really light. This is 6H, okay? I'll put that on the side, okay? Let's do the next one. This is a 4H. Same amount of pressure, same amount of gravity I'm putting on the surface of my paper. Okay, do you see that? And if I'm going too fast, guys, let me know. The next one up will be a 2H. A little bit darker, okay? And the next one up will be, we're gonna skip, instead of the HB, we're gonna skip to the B. Okay, and now this is the B. Now, let's go to the 2B, which is the next one up in terms of darkness. And you can automatically see the huge jump from 6H to your standard 2B pencil. Okay, let's do the next one. In this part, in this demo, guys, we're just getting familiar with some of the material before we start our drawing, okay? This is 3B, okay? Next one up is a 4B. And notice you can kind of see almost a shine on the surface of the graphite, okay? And once you do this on your Strathmore paper, you'll notice that actual major difference with the same amount of pressure that we apply. Now moving to 5B. Okay, it's like a 3, there you go. And then the darkest, which is our 6B. You can see how rich that is in terms of the darkness, okay? I'm gonna zoom in a little bit further, if I can. Just move my paper. I can just move the camera this way. And lower the camera. Can we see that? Oh, sorry, the shadow of the, of the phone is sort of covering that spot. Let me see if I can do this. I could lift my paper. Okay, and you can see that slight difference in terms of their values, okay? Did that make sense from what they're at this stage? You can also tilt the camera. If that actually, let's go this way because it might be helpful to see that side. Right about there. There you go. Now you can slightly see the differences between that really light 6H, the 4, 2H, and then B. Notice we go into the B section, so the 2B is a little bit darker, 3B, 4B, and 5B, and then the richest, which is the 6B, is the richest black, okay? Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. And again, guys, feel free to interrupt me anytime. Okay, let me zoom out a little bit. Lower my paper. Now in this process, you also have to keep in mind we have our sharpener and our white eraser as well as our kneaded eraser. We'll get to the kneaded eraser a little bit later on in this process, but obviously it's depending whether or not how much value you want to incorporate on your drawing itself. And this is where it gets really crucial because sometimes part of this process is, again, trying to be really familiar with the material, right? Understanding how well we can kind of get familiarized with the set of graphite pencils. And then when we encounter these problems, you will then start to see in terms of the gradients of value of how much you actually apply to your drawing. Your preliminary drawing should really start off with a 6H to a 4H or even a 2H at that stage. And one of the reasons why is because it gets actually a lot easier to erase. Something to consider, okay? And the reason why I actually sort of gridded this, it's not actually that straight, but this picture plane on my 18 by 24 inch paper is because we're gonna add a second vanishing point off the picture plane in order to add a set of tiles, okay? And for this assignment, again, we're using our 24-inch aluminum ruler, okay? Those of you who have already purchased your supply kits, this should be already included in your supply kits, so keep this in mind. And notice we have both inches on both sides, so you can flip your actual ruler, so you don't have to constantly, if you're making a diagonal line, you're making a horizon, you can actually calculate exactly how much things are apart inch by inch, okay? There's also a nice black pad, a rubbery pad, so if you apply a little bit of pressure on your surface of your paper, the ruler should not move, okay? Do you have any questions about this? About the materials? Again, you can also have a slight border, 1 inch by 1 inch border around your picture plane or your paper, so you can actually draw out a border if you would like, just to keep it nice and clean. I'm going to leave that decision up to you, okay? Now, let's start. So automatically, I'm going to actually start off with a 6H, okay? Which is the lightest number pencil. And we'll see once we go back, we're actually going to apply more pressure and deeper, richer 6s or 6Bs on top of what we did with the 6H, okay?
Excuse me, sorry for interrupting. Your screen is like, it's like really small. You know how I can possibly change it to where it's like the whole screen?
Are you talking about where my hand is?
Yeah, you're like in the top, and then like your picture of like you painting the face is in the
Is this Grady?
yeah,
Grady, go to gallery view. I see what you're saying.
gallery view.
Yeah, and then do you look at where my hand is?
Where is gallery view?
So you know how the screen on
Oh
Zoom,
yeah, okay, got it.
and then hover your mouse over that screen, and on top right there's those 3 lines,
Yeah.
and then
Pin
click
video.
on pin video.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Of course, and I forgot to actually thank you for bringing that up, just in case some of us were wondering how do we make the main screen largest or larger so we can start to observe. It's actually should be on there, which we just discussed. Did you find it, Grady?
Yeah, I did. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. And again, guys, this is going to be recorded, so just in case, I will upload this on Canvas later on tonight. Okay, so hypothetically, just for the sake of this demo, I'm actually going to work from memory. And I'm going to utilize the fourth floor of the Fine Arts building on campus to actually create a three-dimensional perspective. Okay, I'm going to have a back wall, a series of columns on multiple sides of the wall, as well as entrances to different sides of the building, and then a checkered floor on the bottom, as well as the ceiling with some fluorescent lights and some pipings on the top. Okay, in the most basic aspect, okay, because obviously I've done this multiple times, when you're looking at your reference, you want to be at that eye level line. So if you take your pencil, okay, and any pencil can do this, and directly make it parallel from your eye level line, so you raise your arm upwards, and if I was looking directly through this point of view from a window, I can see how far and how close my horizon line should be. And for the sake of the demo, I'm going to put it right in the center. Okay. Take your ruler. And again, guys, your ruler is going to be your best friend in this process. Okay. It's really crucial for the sake of this assignment to utilize your ruler. And you will see how much mistakes we're going to make in this early stages. And notice it's really, really light. So for the sake of the demo, I'm actually going to jump to a B so you can see how dark that line is. Is that better? Can we see that line?
Yes.
Does anybody have any difficulty not seeing that line? And I'll zoom in slightly so you can see it better. There you go. That's a lot better. Excuse me for the shadow of the camera phone. So I'm then now going to intuitively, instead of putting my back wall all the way in the center, okay, I'm going to actually have it right about here, which is more towards my picture plane. Again, this is your picture plane. Always remember that. To the right-hand side. So right about here. I'll then mark this as my vanishing point. Okay. Let me actually jump to a 2B because I know that's still a little hard to see. There you go. Okay. I then can take my ruler and take my pencil on that vanishing point. Okay. I'm just going to point it on there directly. Take your ruler. Okay. Line it up to that point, and I'm going to line it up to this corner of my picture plane. Okay. So the bottom left. Okay. And I'm also going to do the same thing. Again, I still have my pencil on that same vanishing point. And do it here. Okay. To the same corner. Again, so my paper is slightly warping. Right about, okay. Do we see that? Let me jump to a 4H because it looks like it's a little hard to see in that process. I'll darken these lines. That's much better, right? You can see that clearly. Okay, can we see that? Yes, no, maybe so? Perfect, thank you, Dia. Now, I'm actually going to intuitively assume that I'll make about, let's see, with my ruler, a 2 by 2 inch floor, or I should say back wall at the end of my perspective. So I can take my ruler, here's 13 to 15. I'm going to drop it to right about here. I'm just adding a back wall and take my ruler to a 90-degree angle and make a straight line. And you could also take your ruler, mark it at the same 2 inches. So I have a perfect square. Do the same thing to the top. Okay. And now I have a back wall. Can we see that? Perfect. Okay. And now let me fill in the top of this vanishing point and how it converges. So take my point, go back to my point. Again, all my orthogonal lines will meet on that single vanishing point. Take your ruler, align it to this corner right about here in my picture plane. And do the same thing here. Right about there. Now this is where it gets interesting. I could also expand this wall if I want to make it wider, which I can. And I could do the same thing here. Do the same thing here. And then the same thing here. So this will be on my base. And then I can either erase my previous wall, and we're going to do a lot of erasing. So keep this in mind. I'm actually going to erase the entire thing to indicate that's my back wall. And this is where you can do this with your lighter H's. So the higher the H that we're going to be using, the darker the line. Okay. Just make this closer to this, right about, and you'll do this with a ruler because you want to keep it nice and clean. Okay. I still have my set of horizons, my single horizon line. I have my floor. I have one wall here. I have my ceiling. Then I have another wall here. Did this make sense so far? Okay, thank you. Now, let me just clean up some of these areas, because I know sometimes some of our converging lines can be confusing, but I think showing a little bit of that process actually dramatically helps in this, at this stage. Now, on this side of this wall, okay, and before I get into the rest, I'm going to actually start making another set of orthogonal lines on a second vanishing point off my picture plane. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom out as much as I can. Okay. I'm going to then take, I'm going to sharpen my pencil. You want to keep your pencils nice and sharp so it'll be a lot easier for you to use. And I always like to have these negative spaces so I can make some mistakes and make some errors. So, where my horizon line is, what Alberti constantly talks about, is that in order to create a checkered floor, okay, and in order to create the correct proportion between how large the most closest one is, which is in our foreground, to how much denser and smaller the checkered floor will be, the more it goes to the background. This is where things get interesting, okay? On my horizon line, and it has to be on the same horizon line, I'm gonna make another vanishing point right about there, okay? On the same horizon line, so keep this in mind. I now take my ruler and I can start going to the same picture plane on this corner, make some lines that converge onto that same point. And this is where it gets tricky because you can just slightly move your ruler south of where you are. And I'm just gonna make some random lines on my second vanishing point. Roughly around the same size, so I'm just gonna eyeball it for the sake of the demo. Okay. Could we see that? Let me zoom in a little bit more. Can we see where all of those lines met on the second vanishing point? Okay. I now then can take my ruler and I'm going to go to my back wall here, and right where this angle meets, I'm going to take my ruler, make it a nice straight line, draw a line from here to here. Okay, do the same thing here for the next set. Draw a line right about here and do the same thing here. Notice I'm getting a little bit closer and closer. And do the same thing there. You can then now see how those lines get smaller and denser. And we can calculate to see how far they converge, okay? I'm now gonna add a center line right in my vanishing point. I'm gonna make a direct 90-degree shape, or excuse me, line, right about here. And I'm actually gonna converge on the same point, another set of orthogonals. I'm just gonna eyeball this just for the sake of the demo. And actually, that's actually more than enough. Actually, no, I'm gonna leave it there. I can then start to see my set of tiles. I'm now gonna color them in, so it'll be a lot easier to see. And this, you're gonna do this a little bit, obviously, much more precisely when we have more time. Obviously, I can make them smaller and bigger and change their proportions and compositions if I wanted to. Add more tiles receding in the distance. So I'm going to skip to every other line. And then I'll just darken this area. Or actually, you know what? Let me make another set so it'll be more interesting to see. That's line. Perfect. There you go. Now erase those ones that don't need them. And do the same thing here. So we have a nice checkered floor. Let me erase my second set of orthogonals. Okay. My second vanishing point. And now I have, let me darken this a little bit more. And I can change the thickness and thinness depending on these sets of orthogonals. So I can change my orientation to be a little bit bigger. I can add another set if I wanted to make them more separated. And then let me erase the rest of this so we can start to see our back wall, our set of tiles, and then the rest of our space. Let's stop for a second. What questions do we have so far?
How would you normally go about like making sure that the tiles are equal distance apart?
You could do that, Austin, if you're using your ruler. You could measure out, let's say 1 by 1, 2 by 2, and you can make a mark saying, here is by 1 by 1, excuse me, 2 by 2, and then right about here, I'm going to take this point, mark it with my ruler, and that's my first set.
Oh, okay.
Right there. Did you see that?
Yep.
And then you'll make the adjustments and say, you know what? Actually, let's do it now. I'm going to erase this. Let's see if we can make a perfect tile, or a set of tiles, I should say. Okay. Now you can take your ruler, and then this is 7 to 9, which is the next two, to 11, 15, to 15. But then I notice right about here, Austin, it kind of looks slightly under 17. So if it's 17, it's not going to be quite as accurate. But for the sake of the demo, let's try it.
Yeah, no, the last one's always usually.
Now they all should be the same measurement. And then now the same thing when you line your second point of view on your perspective. Second vanishing point, I should say. Line that converges. Move my graphite pencil here so that I don't get in the way. And then now calculate, let me erase this, because these are going to be off the rest of my space. Remember? So what do we do at this stage? Who can tell me? We go right about here, okay? Line up your ruler. Make it. You could also do the upside down so you can see what's underneath, which also is helpful. And say, alrighty, here's my first set. Do the next one. Do the next. Sorry if my picture plane is moving. That better? Yeah. And then slightly too high. And then, I know it gets a little confusing, but let me darken some of these areas. Now I have my perfect set of tiles. I'll do every other tile so you can see the difference. And they should all match accordingly to my scale, 2 by 2. Notice we get denser and denser the more I move upwards to my back wall, which is the farthest. Can you guys hear me okay? Sorry, I know my mic is on my computer side, so I apologize.
No issues here.
Say again, I'll say that.
No issues here.
Okay, perfect. If not, guys, tell me I can speak a little bit louder. I know the mic is on the opposite side. And obviously you guys are going to be working much more refinedly in this process because I'm just for the sake of the demo, I'm just going to quickly darken some of those areas. Oop, I got to sharpen my pencil. And we're going to encounter these problems constantly. Let me sharpen it now. And I like to use the side of my graphites because it's going to be a lot easier to erase if I make any mistakes. But then now, Austin, can we see this? Or I should say everybody, we can see this, correct? I can see how far those lines are in terms of their proportions. And noticing, if you notice, I'm constantly making these erasing marks all the time throughout the drawing. You will encounter this situation when you're working on your drawings. So remember that. That's why it's a lot easier, if we can, try to work with the higher H's, because it's going to be a lot easier to erase. The higher the B, the more difficult it's going to be to erase. So keep that in mind. Just refining some of those areas so we can see a little bit better, because I know those second orthogonal lines will be a little confusing to see. Okay. Now, let's actually, I want to make this wall closer to us. How would I do that? I'm going to frame this wall, and that was about, what? About 2.5 inches. I'm going to make it to right about 2. So leave this side of my left wall, okay? But I'm just going to, and you could do this with your ruler again from the top to the bottom, just in order to get your measurements correct, okay? I'm gonna make a line right about here, okay? And I'm actually gonna darken the base of the floor so we have a more grounded space. Darken the side. Take my ruler. I'm gonna rate this area right about here. And then do you see where this line is? Okay. I'm actually going to lower that even further. I'll just make a direct line right about there. And that should actually meet right there. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I want to define this line, again, this line is constantly converging on the same point, as my right side wall that is slightly closer, okay? And then I'm also gonna add a base to this wall to make it look like there's a hallway on that side. Do the same thing here, okay? Erase some of these areas. Can we see that now? I'm gonna darken the floor, the black floor on this side so we can separate it. Okay. But then from right about here, this is where it gets slightly crucial, okay? This corner of this wall is closer to us, meaning this wall doesn't end to the back wall. If we're walking intuitively, we can actually walk to the right. So in this hallway, where the Fine Arts building is on the 4th floor, those are where the bathrooms are. And I know this intuitively because, again, that wall is further away than we have our right-hand wall, which is closer to us. Okay. But then let's see if I wanted to add, I'm gonna add a door to this wall. How do I add a door, okay? Again, all of these lines converge, okay? So I always need to keep that in mind. Every single line of my drawing will converge onto that single point. If I take my ruler, you can just point your pencil directly on the first vanishing point, and I'm gonna make my door, again, since this is eye level line from the horizon, usually the door is slightly higher, right? So that's how large doors should be. That would be the top, okay? Let me make the size of my door. And I can calculate this depending on how wide I want my door, okay? And I'm just gonna say, I'm gonna eyeball it to right about here. Can we see this? And then again, I'm just gonna erase. Can we see the door? Let me close up, get it close up. Everybody seeing the door? Perfect, thank you. But then now, this is where it gets interesting. If I want to mimic the same door to this side, but then I want to make a door closer to us, to say, right, let's say hypothetically right about there, and make another door farther away on this wall, I'm going to go to this corner, which is right about here, where the door meets, take my ruler, make a line, and that point right there on the opposite side is where I'm going to make my second door, which is going to be farther away. Take your ruler to 90 degrees, line it up to this corner, make a line right about there. And I'm actually going to set my orthogonal line from my vanishing point to right about, say, right about here. I'm going to go the whole way. Okay. You see that? And then I can flip my ruler to right about, right about there. And that's where my second door will be. And I'll darken that area so we can see. really darken it so it can get really pitch black, so because I want it to recede. Okay, but then if I darken like some of those areas, so again, doors never touch the ceiling. I mean, they could, but in sake of the environment, I know intuitively that door doesn't touch the ceiling. So let me darken this area here. And again, this is really rough, so keep this in mind. And then now if I move my camera closer, what could we tell intuitively? So if we were physically standing in front of this side, like right directly in front of this wall, I know this door is closest to us, right, because it's larger, but I know on the opposite side, this door is far further away to the back wall. Did that make sense? I know it gets a little confusing at this stage. Let's then now add a column to the side. Okay. And where do columns usually jut outwards? Do they jut out on the floor or to the wall? What do you guys think? This is a question for y'all. Where would a column jut outwards?
I'm not sure what's a column, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Think about when we're thinking about a pillar, like where support beams that hold the actual structure of where we are. Does anybody know? And it's okay.
No,
So,
I
have a question.
go ahead, Jihan.
Like, how do you know where the lines go?
They would all converge where? To our vanishing.
Oh, at the center. But then, like, if you want to make like a door, so you like.
Who did not finish this year?
Okay, I think I get it.
Okay. I was gonna say, I know there's a little bit of background in with your mic. Let's make another set of doors on this side, and then we'll make a column right before the second door.
Okay.
I'm gonna say hypothetically, from my right hand side, if I, right parallel to this wall is we have our left hand wall. On this set of tiles, and I'm just gonna do this intuitively. So right about here, where this horizon line is, I'm gonna make a line right about there. Now I wanna make a squared column that comes outwards, okay? And notice, obviously my hands are a little bit, have a lot of graphite on there because I've been making some series of marks. So just keep that in mind. I'm gonna take my ruler and I'm actually gonna make a 1/2 inch column, okay? Take my ruler on the right-hand side, line it up parallel to this line. Okay, you know what, actually I forgot the top. I'm gonna go all the way so we can see what we're doing, okay? And then I'm gonna take this corner, let me zoom in. Take this corner, line it up to my vanishing point. Again, all lines converge. Okay, and I still notice there's that line right behind that wall, so I'm gonna acknowledge that. But I'll also say, again, intuitively, I'm gonna make my column right about that thick. So we have about a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch. Make another line. Okay. But then what happens to the top? How do I make that line converge? What do? You take your ruler to this point, to right about here. Make a straight horizon. And depending on your actual physical space, and again, depending on you guys' reference, you can have another column on the opposite side, but for the sake of the demo, we don't. We're just gonna add one column. And you'll take this point here, and you'll converge it onto my vanishing point. And now let me do some erasing. Oh, you know what? Actually, I converged onto the wrong ones. I apologize. Let me erase this one more time. Wait 1 second. Here, let me do this again so you can darken it a little bit further. Right about here, I'm going to make this line converge. There you go. Now I can erase it again. And then I can darken this area. And then if I darken this side, this is the side of my column. Again, you don't have to darken this, but just for the sake of the demo. I'm going to erase the bottom of this line right about there because I don't need that, because that was the back wall. Obviously, the column's not transparent. Just erase this a little bit more. But then now you can start to see, once you clean it up, the column juts outwards to the floor. Now we know that the actual column is the support base from where the wall is that juts outwards. So it's coming inwards to the space. Did that make sense? We're just looking at the architectural spaces to see how the function of a column, of a door, of a window will start to be illustrated in the process of creating that perspective, okay? What questions do we have so far? Okay. Now I'm gonna make a door that actually enters to the left. Now this is where it gets interesting. You can use your tile as your guide if you want to. And let's say I can say hypothetically the door will be halfway through that tile. I'm gonna make a line. What about there? Okay. But then from this corner, okay, so right about here, straighten your line. Because again, remember, we're not curving our lines in terms of our architectural spaces. You really think about it. We're really just lining them up on our base of the surface of our paper. Erase this horizon so we can see this better. And I'm also going to make a small little entrance here. And this is where it gets interesting, because I had a student ask, if we add a set of tiles here, can you just continue on? In theory, you sure can. So let's pretend, for the sake of the demo, the tiles continue. Actually, let's do it. Okay. And I'm just lining it up to those previous lines I made. And then now you can see I can add another set of orthogonals. And this is going back to Austin's question of, if you want to make them proportionally correct, you can. Mark your second 2-inch. I'll do that here so you can see off your picture plane. Sorry. So right about here. So we know these are 2 inches wide. Add another mark here. And I know I won't see this side, but then I can use my guide. Zoom out. Okay. Use my ruler as my guide. Go to my vanishing point. Mark from this point here to my vanishing. And you can then calculate those exactly the same. So then this will be darkened. Did that make sense? If you want to correct or finish your tiled floors.
I have a question.
Go ahead, yeah.
For the left side, will the ceiling be like, we will have to, in case that was the case, like it will be left empty, right? Or like, would we add something to it?
Oh, we're going to add a ceiling.
On the left side as well?
The entire side, yeah.
Oh, okay.
You're talking about this side?
Yes, yes.
No, that's actually a great question. Let's fix now, let's look at the top of this ceiling wall, because now this becomes a wall. Because remember, we're adding a door to this side. I'm going to take my ruler to this point, and I'm going to actually make a horizon line, or another horizontal line right about there. And then now I can see end of the wall, door. This is on the wall of that door. Column, wall, same wall. And then this becomes in front of us, because it's directly in front of us is the same way as this wall is. And notice these walls are what? They're flat, right? They're not converging onto that point. The only other walls that are converging are these two. So this wall and this wall with the column are converging onto that point. Again, you have to think about this intuitively. What's in front of you, okay, which is this wall and this wall now, are flat, right? We don't see any of these lines converging onto that point. They're just proportionally almost the same scale to this wall, for example, meaning they're the same sort of dimensions in terms of their flatness on opposite sides. So then, for example, if I added a door that sort of comes in front of this wall, you can do that. I'm just going to guess that, like sort of scale. Do it right about here. Let's keep it. I'm actually going to cut it off so we can see that scale. So then now, and then now, I can also add some molding if I want to, like to frame my door. You don't have to do this, but just for the sake of the demo. And then we'll say it's right about, that's 1/2 of the door, and this will be the knob. So we can see one side of a door, but obviously intuitively, because of our picture plane, it won't fit the other side because we've sort of calculated to see, okay, how big is this? If that's the same measurement, it'll be off my picture plane. That's what? About 1.5 inches. If I added another 1.5, it'll come off to here. So obviously it's off of the picture plane. That's when you know you've moved beyond your picture plane, okay? And this is where it gets interesting, because if you really think about it, let me erase these areas. Notice this wall now then continues, right? But then right about here, and this is your question going back to the left-hand side, do we have a ceiling? Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Now, this is the ceiling of that hallway. Do you see that? Did that make sense?
I see it, but it looks a bit confusing to me.
It's going to be really confusing in our first stages, okay? And I know this because obviously we've never worked with linear perspective, so I keep that in mind, which is completely okay. Again, guys, this is a foundation level course. We're just trying to learn the system of linear perspective. For the sake of the demo, this is a very basic structure, right? Even if you want to submit this as your drawing, I'm not going to question what reference you use, okay? But I want you to kind of be researching your own image as your point of view in order to create your sort of environment. And there lies the sort of personality and the kind of perspective you want to give us, okay? So some of these areas. And then you're going to do a lot of erasing. And that's the point of the project, is you'll start to see how some of the proportions will encounter in terms of each other, in terms of how wide my tiles are to my column. How big is this door in relationship to how far this wall is? Did this make sense? Let me zoom in a little bit further. Okay. What about my ceiling? I'm going to make a set of orthogonal lines, and I can do the same thing. I'm just going to work upside down, so I'm going to move to the other side. The same way I'll have my tiles as 2 by 2 inches, I can do the same thing here. And that's 8, 12, 14, 16, okay? You're gonna take your ruler, align it to this point. That's 1. Right about there. Sorry, my pencil's moving. It's another set. And then my last one. Okay. We're gonna, again, do a lot of erasing. Okay. And then what I also can do, since that sort of measurement sort of converges on that point, you could set up your second vanishing point, again, off of your picture plane. Remember where we have our second vanishing point, which is right about there. Hold on. Do we see it? Okay. We line up a ruler and we can start to calculate and add a set of ceilings or sort of a grid for my ceiling. But let's say if I didn't want to do that, okay? Let's say if it's just completely blank. What's going to happen there, okay? What you can do is literally, you can take your 6B. I like to sharpen it. Really get in there, okay? And I'm going to darken the entire ceiling, just for the sake of the demo. Applying a lot of gravity to really get in there. Can we see the ceiling? Move this area. Okay. What questions do we have? And again, guys, I hope we do have questions because I know this process is a little tedious and it's a little redundant, but the more you start to focus on your actual vanishing point on your horizon line, and notice we don't even see the horizon line anymore because we've erased so much. You could go back and put it in there just for the sake of looking at your entire space. We now can see if we added figures, and this is where we're not going to have time to obviously add figures, but if you did, they will be where? Looking on the lecture. If we reviewed the lecture from last class, that what did Alberti talk about? He stated that if you added figures in a three-dimensional picture plane, in a three-dimensional world, reality, they will be around where? Their heads should be around the horizon line, right? And then you can see, let's say if you added a figure right about there, how large are they in terms of how their feet touch the floor and how they would enter this space or enter this space and then vice versa. Those are figures, if they're added closer to us, will be what? Will be larger. Figures that are adding to the back of this wall will be what? Smaller. Did that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So we have Lee, Jihan, Javari, Ian, Grady, Dia, and Austin. Guys, what questions do we have now? So I want you, go ahead. On the sides. I'm going to stop the recording, and then we'll have time for question and answers. Okay, give me 1 second.